This is your latest Manchester United transfer news at the start of another week. Will we end the week with some transfer activity? Only 4 weeks to go of this transfer window. Remember, United only have Tielemans and Santos. I would say we need 3 more major signings in 4 weeks. Will it happen? Well, if it's going to happen, it needs to start happening this week. So we've got talks of a Camavinga bid. We've got the latest on Lewis Hall and on Lewis Skelly. We've also got a very interesting list of targets for Manchester United this summer, which I think will generate a lot of conversation as well. Also, a few other bits to get into too, and some comments coming in from journalists, which I think are quite interesting as well this morning. But look, I want to start off with this Camavinga stuff because, look, ultimately, we're not in talks with anybody at the moment. I mean, we went through this last night. Man United are not in talks with any club as of 9 a.m, 10 a.m. this morning. We're not. We're not holding talks with Bournemouth for Scott. We're not holding talks with Newcastle for Hall. We're not holding talks with Roma for Kone. We're not holding talks with anybody. And remember, next week, the Rashford circus starts. And I don't think anybody's figured this out yet. So when you talk about 4 weeks left in the window, if we do nothing this week, it's all about Rashford next week, and then you're down to 2 weeks. Because when Rashford walks back next week with his trainers under his arm, it's the Rashford story. And Rashford can't help that. United can't do much about it. So next week's all going to be about Rashford. You know it is. So 2 weeks can go like that if we don't start doing something. Will we start doing something this week? Well, let's start off with Real Madrid, because basically Mourinho was not happy after Real Madrid's game at the weekend. And coming out of Spain, Camavinga is the player that Real Madrid would love to sell to Manchester United. Now, Camavinga has been resistant to being forced out of Real Madrid so far, but obviously they're looking to sign Rodri. There's a lot of players coming back. Tchouaméni isn't even back yet either. So that is a player that some people believe Man United are waiting on. They're waiting on Camavinga to figure out that he's not part of Real Madrid's plan so Man United can move ahead. A lot of people feel it's Camavinga. A lot of people don't think it's Tchouaméni. And remember, in relation to Tchouaméni, I don't intend to talk about him coming to Manchester United this morning. There's still people who weirdly, wildly think that he is the player. Remember, with Tchouaméni, he doesn't come back to training until the middle of next week. So take a week and a half off the final 4 weeks. You'd have 2.5 weeks left of the window when Tchouaméni comes back. Real Madrid would then have to say to him straight away, you're up for sale. And with 2.5 weeks left, you've got to try and do a deal with Man United. Because no one's talking to Tchouaméni at the moment. No one's saying anything other than you've got a new contract. So he doesn't come back to training until the middle of next week, when there'll be 2.5 weeks left of the window. Do you think Man United can do a deal for Tchouaméni in 2.5 weeks? I don't. So I think if we're doing any deal with Real Madrid, and remember, they've still got to sign Rodri, it probably would be Camavinga, because that's the player Mourinho wants out. That's the player Perez wants out. That's the player they want to make some money on. And is that the player that Man United are waiting on over Kone? We'll have to wait and see. But look, do you want Camavinga at Man United? Do I want Camavinga at Man United? I mean, at the end of the day, I just want a midfielder at Man United. I mean, and I can also, as I said to you last night, in relation to Kone, I think this is the sort of level we're going to end up with. So I'm long past the point of going, it's going to be Alex Scott or it's going to be Tchouaméni. I mean, look, this list here, and let me read it out. So this is a list of definitive, i.e. definite targets that United have gone for and not got since January. Tell me your thoughts on this, because this is not speculation. These are all players that have had credible long-term sources talking about them, journalists, that United never came out and said we weren't doing it. Remember, with Romero, they came out within 24 hours and said we're not interested. So Semenyo, we bid for and we lost out to. Elliot Anderson, we wanted all season and we didn't get. Diamonde was the player that we were going for 3 months after Semenyo. We didn't get him. Mateus Fernandes, we battled with Spurs for. We didn't get him. Tonali, we spent 2 months briefing that we wanted him. We didn't get him. Bruno Guimaraes was in the international break, remember, for 2 weeks. We didn't get him. Tchouaméni, obviously, we haven't got him. And we're now on to Lewis Hall. So that's 8 players in 6 months that United have been in for and not got. So with 3-4 weeks left in the window, I'm sort of past thinking we're going to get a player of that quality, and I'm sort of going, if it's Kone, if it's Camavinga, let's just crack on with it. Let's just crack on with it. I know it's not the summer we thought it was going to be, and I think the summer has been pathetic. But with 4 weeks left in the window, if it's Camavinga or Kone, are they going to bench Santos? I don't know. Are they going to compete with Santos? Yes. I think that's just what we need now. We've got Tielemans and Mainu. We've got Santos. Get another midfielder in to compete with him, and let's get on with the season. So look, would I have wanted Camavinga at the start of the summer transfer window? No, I'd have been saying Elliot Anderson. I'd have been saying Tonali. I'd have been saying Matheus Fernandes. I'd have been saying Tchouaméni. But where we are now, I probably would take Camavinga. And I'll still say it's been a pathetic transfer window, but I still think someone like Camavinga would give us something. So look, maybe that is the player United are waiting on. Certainly over in Spain, that's what they think. They don't think it's Tchouaméni, they think it's Camavinga. And this is a player that Real Madrid want to sell. Like, Tchouaméni is not for sale for Real Madrid. There is theories that if they get Rodri, they might sell him. I don't think they will. I think if you are a Man City or an Arsenal or a Real Madrid, you want Rodri and Tchouaméni because it's a long, hard season. And, you know, you want competition for places. I don't think Tchouaméni is the player. I think it could be Camavinga. Would you go for Camavinga or Kone? You know the poll was coming. Let me know your thoughts on that. But, look, whatever we're going to do, let's make sure that we do something in the midfield because, you know, it definitely needs to happen.
Feels like there's so much to discuss. Dan, let's come straight to you. Yep. The summer market. Do you think Manchester United are happy with their business so far?
I think we're probably on par with where we thought Manchester United would be. Look, we went into the summer thinking they need to really reinforce that midfield. They were under no illusions. That was a priority going in. It was a very interesting first month with Ederson. You know, we thought Manchester United had started their summer, you know, very quickly, trying to wrap up Ederson before he then went to the World Cup. And obviously, that's not materialised. But then they moved very quickly once Matheus Fernandes didn't look very likely to then wrap up André Santos and Youri Tielemans for just less than what Fernandes has cost Tottenham. So, in my eyes, the midfield has been partly solved. Probably need another midfielder. But I think this is very much going to be dependent on a few more outgoings. That's how I want to judge United a little bit. See what they can do with their outgoings, as well as maybe one or two more significant signings.
What do you think? Well, I mean, André Santos at 50, Carl Darlow's come in for free, Youri Tielemans £36 million, and of course Tynan Thompson, £4 million plus 4, isn't it, from Spurs, sort of more of a youth edition, but could offer an option on that left-hand side. Where are you at?
I guess the one that, for me, that probably excites me most, or should excite Manchester United fans the most, would be the Youri Tielemans signing, because that's someone who, it kind of follows on from the plan that we saw last season that sort of paid dividends at Manchester United, where, you know, you buy players who are already playing in the league, who already have that understanding and have performed. And Youri Tielemans fits that bill, a bit of an experienced head as well. So I think that one would be the most exciting. Look, the others, you know, you're looking at Tynan Thompson, one for the future, obviously. Carl Darlow is not going to be playing a hell of a lot in the Premier League. But in terms of Youri Tielemans, that is one that I think that a lot of Manchester United fans will be excited about.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, when you look at the business United were hoping to do, and Ederson was clearly high on their agenda, as was Matheus Fernandes, they are quite different profiles to Youri Tielemans, who is much more of an experienced Premier League name, seemingly a really good fee because he had that release clause. Have United sort of stumbled into potentially the better half of a deal here? Because I know that some fans weren't happy with that Ederson move, were they?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much how you look at this. I think you can look half cup empty or half cup full. I mean, you could argue, look, Manchester United have been slightly indecisive because they went for Ederson, found something they didn't like, and actually, like you said, you could argue, oh, this is their plan B, C, D. However, I would probably see more of the value of, we're used to Manchester United in previous years under a different leadership being involved in long, drawn-out transfer sagas where, look, I have no issue, and I can put my pride aside to say, we had absolutely no idea about Youri Tielemans signing for Manchester United.
Yeah.
André Santos, maybe 24 hours that we knew that they were interested, the deal was done. You know, and Youri Tielemans, as you mentioned, well, this is a guy who has years of experience in the league. He's won trophies, by the way, at both clubs he's been at, where you'd probably argue, you know, he's left them better than they were. Leicester obviously got relegated when he left, but you see my point. So Look, I think with Manchester United's window generally, we will have to judge them at the end of it. You know, do they end up, I know we'll talk about possible additions later, but where they end the window, I think will be much more reflective of their window as a whole. But I still think there's a lot to do in terms of incomings and outgoings.
One addition that we have to talk about is Andre Santos. We mentioned him a couple of times. Another player that really came out of the blue, like you said, sort of 24 hours, 48 hours that was wrapped up in. I have to say, I've been incredibly impressed by him in pre-season. I think his ability to pick the ball up in those deep line areas is what United have missed for an awfully long time. But, you know, again, some Chelsea fans were saying, we're happy to let him go here. Chelsea seemingly are happy to let him go because they have at £50 million. Where are you at on Andre?
I think, like Dan says, it was a surprise. Andre Santos kind of came out of nowhere as a name. It was before, when you're talking about the rumblings before the transfer window opens, you're not necessarily talking about Andre Santos to Manchester United. But like yourself, I have been impressed with him during pre-season.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, listen,
it's pre-season now.
You're both
Can we relax?
in the trap.
No, it is
pre-season. That's fine.
Class against
Pre-season Pirlo. No, listen, I think that ability to just pick up the ball from deep, like you're saying, and look forward and just like progress the ball through the lines. I think that's ultimately what I guess Carrick would have been looking for when you're talking about midfielders to come in. You want midfielders with a bit of personality on the ball that can take the ball under pressure and play forward. So we have ticked off a profile in getting Andre Santos. And looking at the sort of reaction on social media as well, I don't know if you guys have seen this too, but I think a lot of Chelsea fans aren't happy that Andre Santos is now playing for Manchester United. Yeah, definitely a mixed
reaction.
And I think that would be some food for a bit of positivity around the signing as well, because listen, he's had a lot of time. He wasn't involved in the World Cup, so he's had some time to sort of bed in, train, and from the start of pre-season too. So that is someone that I'm looking at throughout the course of the season. He could develop, and we could turn around and say, wow, what a signing he was.
I think something you mentioned, Joe, was how these targets all seem different profiles. But I think we also fall into a trap, I think, because Casemiro left in the summer of they need to replace Casemiro.
Yeah.
They need an exact replica of Casemiro. And we look at these replacements or the midfielders coming, we're going, but can Andre Santos do what Casemiro did? Or how does Yuri Tillmans do anything near? Yeah. But I don't think that's the point here. And I think we need to give Michael Carrick some space to maybe change how Manchester United were playing in those 6 months he had last season, to maybe transition to play a bit more football. I mean, I think there's been an outcry in the Manchester United fan base that they want like a midfield destroyer, which, look, Carlos Baleba, for example, someone they long admire, I would absolutely love to see a Manchester United shirt, but not every team needs to have a midfield, tough tackling. You know, you look at Arsenal, right? Declan Rice is incredibly good at interceptions and recoveries, but you wouldn't necessarily say any of Arsenal's midfielders are a Roy Keane, Patrick Vieira type, right? There are many ways to profile in midfield, and I think for Manchester United, if Yuri Tillmans, for example, is one of those deeper options next to a Kobbie Mainoo or Andre Santos, I think Andre Santos just seems very malleable. You know, he's so young still, and there's so much room to develop. You can make him into a slightly deeper Casemiro type if you need him to be, but he's clearly very good at long line-breaking passes as well. So I think everyone's vision of what Manchester United should be and will be and could have been with Casemiro or not, I think it'll be just very interesting to see once they get going in the league.
Do you think that's the plan then, to kind of move away this vision that Michael Carrick kind of has for Manchester United's midfield? I think a lot of fans have been raving about Michael Carrick, you know, being a big fan of the PSG midfield, for example, and maybe that's a direction he wants to take his Manchester United team. And when you look at the profiles that we brought in, like you say, have we replaced Casemiro for what Casemiro was? Not necessarily, but we've kind of prioritized maybe technical ability. So you've got that rather than, like you're saying, the destroyer. So have we got an insight into Michael Carrick's vision for Manchester United's midfield?
But I think, you know, it's not that long ago under Ruben Amorim with similar players, right, that we would watch many, many games, okay, slightly in a different system. You couldn't break a team down, no matter who it was in the league, you know, whether it was higher in the league, lower in the league. So that's definitely something I think Michael Carrick will be aware of. And you see what he did at Middlesbrough, now at Manchester United, where he essentially has three at the back and he progresses one of the full-backs quite high wide. And, you know, you don't have to go into all the tactics, but he clearly wants this team to dominate the football and peg teams back. And you need the players to be able to unlock defences to do that. Andre Santos and Yuri Tillmans are two players who can do that. also in terms of defensive qualities, I think we can all agree Kobbie Mainoo really developed in that side of his game towards the end of last season. I mean, Michael Carrick, I was in many press conferences last season, especially the Chelsea game at Stamford Bridge. To me, that was Kobbie Mainoo showing a different side of his game. That, look, he's still so young. We kind of discount Kobbie Mainoo like he can't defend or he's not capable. He's still very young. You can still learn that side of the game. I mean, my question to both of you is, you know, it's not too long now till the first game of the season against Hull. What's your ideal? Who are your two in midfield starting that game?
Well, I think first game of the season. First game of the season, I would be surprised to see Youri Tielemans straight into the team just because he's arrived latest from the World Cup, right? I think Mason Mount has really put a name down for himself in his pre-season performances to say I should be starting in the midfield alongside Andre Santos, because of course Kobbie Mainoo is coming back from the World Cup as well, went extremely deep. I know he didn't play, but still travelling and stuff. So I would say first game of the season, I can see it being Santos and Mount. But I think as the season progresses, I think you'll see Mainoo and Tielemans.
Yeah, I think Mason Mount's a very interesting one. Listen, he had a very, very good pre-season, and you know he's one that, listen, coming into it, he's had this summer break. He's been able to play, you know, to train. Michael Carrick seems to be a very big fan. Every manager seems to be a big fan of Mason Mount, and I look at him and I say that's someone he's got the right attitude.
Is he better deeper? Is he better deeper in that 8 position?
I think he's played there, and I think it's not a position that's alien to him. I think we kind of look at Mount and we think number 10. We think about some of the Chelsea days, could probably higher up in the pitch, maybe behind the striker. I think he's played there for England as well. But I think Mason Mount can play alongside Kobbie Mainoo, for example, and we saw that towards the back end of last season, the Brighton game, and he was brilliant. He was brilliant then. So it's not this revelation that we're seeing Mason Mount playing deep. But Michael Carrick clearly trusts him and sees a player that can play as an 8. And I think that's interesting. So for me, I think Mason Mount should probably start just based on pre-season alone. And then perhaps Andre Santos, and maybe Kobbie Mainoo comes back and we see something during pre-season. Because again, not playing for England, it might help you.
Is there going to be a third arrival in that midfield role? Because obviously it's much talked about, isn't it? And I think most Man United fans that you see online or you speak to in person are saying, well, they've spent 50 million on Santos, 36 on Tielemans. Where's the big ticket arrival? And obviously they chose not to pursue Matej Fernandes in the end, to the tune that Tottenham Hotspur ended up going to. Do we actually see that happening? I personally don't see United going out and spending that much money on a midfielder.
No. I agree with you. I think, look, from my understanding right now, and of course things can change, so I'll always caveat with that little phrase there.
124, Monday the 3rd of August.
But I think even going into the transfer window, I mean, it was always my understanding Manchester United were never going to spend 90 million for a midfielder. I mean, yes, they were very close to Matej Fernandes, but as soon as they saw Tottenham were probably going to outbid them if that ended up being a bidding war, I think also what you've seen in their recruitment is they're very much... they put a lot of weight on players wanting to play for Manchester United. And look, I know this sounds very cliche, but we saw it with Matheus Cunha, Bryan Mbeumo, Benjamin Šeško, who could have gone to Newcastle. And I think with Matheus Fernandes, there didn't feel to be the same desire, to play for Manchester United. So they walked away. Elliot Anderson, once Manchester City went over 100 million, they were never in that race. Alex Scott, similar. Carlos Baleba, similar. Might be one for next summer, but for this summer, those options at this moment are off the table. Do I still see them looking at another midfielder? For sure. They're analysing this market and seeing what's developing. But I also think they're also looking at a left-back, which, I've been saying since March. And, pardon my language, I know it's not a sexy position to talk about, but they really need a left-back. They really need a left-back because Luke Shaw cannot play 3 games a week. He was brilliant to get through 38 games last season. Great achievement. And this isn't a disservice to him, but you can't expect him to play Champions League, then back to Premier League as well. So I would argue the necessity, as you mentioned, Mount is a £55 million potential replacement in midfield there. The necessity has to be future-proofing left-back.
I mean, all right, let's have a look at that then, the transfer to-do list sort of thing, in terms of a left-back. Is that top priority for you over a midfielder now? Because I know you were saying you was analysing the squad earlier. You were thinking,
no, listen, I think when you look at Manchester United's midfield options, it looks a little bit light. I know you've brought in Youri Tielemans.
Lighter than left-back?
It's no, but listen, the midfield was the priority before the start of the season, and in terms of the kind of energy that was kind of around Manchester United and driven up a lot by the fan base, there was a lot of excitement about just off the back of the season. Listen, you finish third, you're like, cool. Can Manchester United find a couple of midfielders, and all of the names that were being linked? There was Elliot Anderson towards the start of the window, also linked to Manchester United, and you're like, these are good names. And then now, fast forward to at this point in the window, it doesn't feel like Man United have kind of quenched that thirst that a lot of fans and a lot of people were thinking where Manchester United should be in terms of their midfield. So for that reason alone, the idea of not having another Manchester United midfield, I think, should worry some. But I do agree that left back is very light. Luke Shaw, for how good I personally think he was last season, he can't play every game. I just don't see that happening. So yeah, left back very important.
There is no doubt the biggest drop in the next player up is left back. Like there is no doubt in that squad. If you look at their depth chart, it's left back. So they absolutely need a left back. But I think on Will's point, I totally get what you're saying about players they were linked with and, you know, potential targets, etc. And, you know, maybe actually look at this point in the transfer window, would they have hoped to get more in? Potentially. But I also think there are factors that they couldn't have planned for. You know, going into the window, they were looking at making over £100 million, you know, getting back in the Champions League. You have players off the wage books like Jadon Sancho, Casemiro, but then also what was going to be included were potential sales of, you know, Marcus Rashford, Manuel Ugarte. Now, we can talk about Marcus Rashford a bit later, but Manuel Ugarte's injury, you know, very disappointing for him as a person and as a player. But, you know, it may seem silly money, but that is money they were hoping to then reinvest into the squad. Marcus Rashford coming back, you know, we all know he's on significant wages. That isn't necessarily what they were planning for going into the summer. So plans also do have to change, and you also can't solve everything in one window. You know, the desire to get this big midfielder was there last summer, and they finished third. And this isn't me excusing the recruitment so far, but I just think, you know, they're trying to work with Sansoni's data team, who are very data-driven, and we've heard a lot about this, but their logic last summer was improve the attack. That'll get you highest up the table from where they finished previous season. And you kind of work backwards. And that's what they're trying to do. Appreciate your point, though. They absolutely need that star midfielder.
Yeah.
But it just might not happen this summer.